Greetings, welcome to another Deckard Games YouTube playing on another GeForce RTX, this time being a Gigabyte Gaming OC 8G for 8 gigabytes of VRAM with the Nvidia 3060 Ti. What better way to start the year than by unboxing and testing a new card? Right at the front, Gigabyte lets you know that it has some RGB because, well, it features the RGB Fusion logo. It also features their cooling system, the Wind Force, and it lets you know that, well, it is indeed the OC edition. The back of the box shows us the Gigabyte cooling system with 3 fans spinning in different directions and whatnot. The RGB Fusion thingy with the Gigabyte logo, also the backplate, and well, it publicities some well, streaming multiprocessors. Who gives a crap about that? Ray tracing cores, that's cool. Tensor cores, which is cool for some sweet DLSS. Game drivers ready, whatever. GeForce Experience and Shadow Play, sure, why not? And it also lets you know that it has 2 display ports and 2 HDMI ports. The side of the box is, as one would expect, the sides of the box. So yeah, let's unbox this guy. Let us see what Gigabyte is willing to offer us, and let's give it a go. If you're a tech-savvy kind of person, you can't go wrong with Switch technology in Lisboa. Switch technology has a lot of stores in different locations, great service and awesome prices. But most of all, they have great customer care because they are passionate about computers, old and new. Please check the link below for more information. Let's open it up. You have some foam. We have a quick start guide for the GPU. Great. We have the card itself, which is quite big. Do we have anything else? No. What the crap. They send you less and less stuff every year. So let's open our baggie. Ah, that is a pretty nice backplate, real shiny with the RTX logo in there and the Gigabyte logo also. And there it is, the tri-fan cooling solution from Gigabyte. 1 PCIe connector only, and as you can see, the PCB stops right there, and all of this is just your heatsink and another fan. So this could be a dual fan system only or GPU only if the card ended right there. So yeah, at the I/O section of things we have 2 display ports and 2 HDMI, and that's pretty much it. I don't see any BIOS switch and stuff like that. So yeah, let's put this into a machine and play some games. Now testing will be made using my computer, where we have a Seasonic Focus 750 watt 80 plus platinum power supply. We have a Gigabyte X570 Aorus Elite. We are going to use the AMD Ryzen 7 3700X and some 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. As for the GPU, we already know that we are using the Gigabyte GeForce RTX 3060 Ti Gaming OC, but here are some specs on the screen. The time has come to start throwing some numbers at the screen. We're going to go game by game, and in each game we are going to run 3 resolutions, 1080p, 1440p and 4K, to see how it scales. Starting things off with Battlefield 5 running with DirectX 12 at ultra settings and ray tracing. At 1080p we get an average of 110 frames per second with a minimum of 54 and 75 1% lows. Scale up to 1440p and the average drops to 82 frames per second, still very much playable, with a minimum of 54 and 55 1% lows. At 4K, as one would expect, things start to go not so well. We get an average of 40 frames per second, with minimums and 100% lows going all over the place. Next is Borderlands 3, again a DirectX 12 game at ultra settings. At 1080p we get an average of 92 frames per second, with a minimum of 25. 1440p gets an average of 69 frames per second, with a minimum of 54 and 58 1% lows. Going 4K we get 39 frames per second on average, with 33 1% lows. Next up is Control, quite the demanding game with ultra settings, ray tracing and DLSS. At 1080p Control gets an average of 102 frames per second, with 48 1% lows, very playable at this resolution. At 1440p, average frames per second drop to 72, which is still playable, with 55 1% lows. Scaling to 4K, average frames per second are almost cut in half, going to 39 with a minimum of 39 and 38 1% lows. While not too enjoyable, Control managed to run at a leveled pace. Next is Cyberpunk, again a DirectX 12 game at ultra settings with ray tracing at medium and DLSS on auto. At 1080p we get an average of 77 frames per second with a minimum of 71. 1440p gets an average of 55 frames per second with a minimum of 48 and 44 1% lows. Going 4K we get 36 frames per second on average with 26 1% lows. Up next we have Death Stranding at ultra settings with great use of the DLSS. At 1080p Death Stranding gets an average of 152 frames per second with 121% lows. Going to 1440p, average frames drop to 133 with 111 1% lows. Going up to 4K we get 85 frames per second on average with 79 1% lows. Death Stranding, as the numbers show, is playable in every resolution. Next game is Doom Eternal running the Vulkan API at Ultra Nightmare settings. At 1080p Doom gets an average of 258 frames per second with 174 1% lows. Going up to 1440p, average frames per second drop to 183 with 122 1% lows. Going up again to 4K, Doom gets 89 frames per second on average and 57 1% lows. I always say that Doom doesn't count because Vulkan can run on a pregnancy test, but people seem to enjoy it, so here it is. Up next we have GTA 5, the only DirectX 11 game on the list, running at ultra settings. 1080p gets an average of 175 frames per second. 1440p drops the average to 171 frames per second with 13 1% lows. Going 4K drops again to 114 frames per second, making GTA 5 a very playable game in all three resolutions. Next we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider running at the highest settings. At 1080p we get 137 frames per second on average, with 15 1% lows. Going 1440p brings the average down to 98 frames per second. At 4K the average drops again to 52 with 43 1% lows. We also have the 3D Mark and its Time Spy demo, getting at 1080p 107 frames per second in test 1 and 88 in test 2. Going up to 1440p, numbers drop to 76 and 64 frames per second. At 4K, numbers are cut in half with 37 and 34 frames per second. And we also have 3D Mark Port Royal, getting at 1080p an average of 52 frames per second. Going up to 1440p, numbers drop to 31, and at 4K, numbers go to slideshow land with 12 frames per second. Please bear in mind that 3D Mark is a stress tool and not a real-life scenario. 3D Mark should be used mainly for overclocking purposes to see how a same card can scale with clock intensifications. To sum things up, here we have a graphic with the average of all the games tested. Keep in mind that averages are averages, this meaning that a couple of games can bring the final numbers up or down. At 1080p, the RTX 3060 Ti got an average of 138 frames per second. At 1440p, that number drops just a little to 108 frames per second. Finally, at 4K, frames per second go down almost 40% to 62. Again, these are just average numbers of all the tests. When it comes to thermals and running the Time Spy demo on a loop for about half an hour, the card reaches its maximum temperature of 59 degrees Celsius or 138 Fahrenheit in less than a minute and just stays there. This means that the cooling system is efficient, stopping the card from overheating. We don't see spikes going up and down. Remember again, this is a stress test. As you can see in the bottom graphic, the GPU clock is at maximum all the time. In real-life gaming, temperatures will vary in time associated with GPU usage. As for noise levels during the 3D Mark Time Spy stress demo, we got an average of 51 decibels with a maximum of 62. The measurement was made with the case open and at approximately 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches of distance. Obviously that closing the case reduces the noise levels and, in my personal experience, the card is overall pretty silent. So would I recommend the RTX 3060 Ti? Well, let's get one thing out of the way first. This is not, as the numbers show, a 4K gaming GPU, because, well, it isn't. It deals pretty well with 1080p and even 4040p in some cases, but it's not a 4K gaming GPU. And beside that, well, it is a card that costs around $650, more or less, and I don't know. Nvidia has this thing of putting cards together to each other, flooding the market and stuff. They've been doing this since the, I don't know, maybe the GeForce 4 or something, but yeah, the GeForce, the RTX 3070, you can find one around, I don't know, maybe $700, maybe a little bit more. But if you really look for it, you can get it around 700. So we are talking about more or less a $50 difference. So I don't know, 650 for this one, 700 or a little bit more for the 3070. If it was me, I would go with a 3070, but well, Nvidia thinks this is a entry-level card to the RTX 3000 series, so well, things are what they are. Let me know in the comment section below what do you think of the 3060 Ti. And as long as you are there, don't forget to leave a thumbs up in this video, because what better way to start the year than by giving a thumbs up to me, why not? And click that subscribe button, because your support is always and very much appreciated. Remember that you can follow me on social media if you want to, because social media is the new thing since, well, quite a few years now, but yeah, whatever. As always, thank you very much for watching this video that you just did. Expect more RTX things in the future, and until my next video, please do take care.